Hi everyone and welcome to the inaugural Davis and Shirtliff podcast. My name is Elvis Khamala and I am the Group Water Treatment Manager at Davis and Shirtliff. And today with me we have a guest. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Gatukui, a dentist by profession, practicing at the AAR Dentist.
So today we will be talking about fluoride in water and we'll cover a couple of things, starting from the effects of fluoride in water, and at the end we'll look at the solutions for removing fluoride from water. So Doc, I think we get right into it. Please, from a dental perspective, just tell us about fluoride.
Fluoride is a naturally occurring element that we interact with quite a lot as dentists. You will have noticed on your toothpaste tube that one of the ingredients is fluoride, that your toothpaste tube contains such and such an amount of fluoride. Why is this the case? Fluoride has been known to increase the strength of the dental hard tissues. During the tooth development process, when fluoride is incorporated into the structure of the tooth, it changes the crystalline structure of the tooth such that the resulting structure is much stronger and more resistant to dental caries and more resistant to bacterial acids. And that is why we put fluoride in toothpaste and in other dentifrices like your mouthwash. Sometimes you come even to the dental office, you have a bit of sensitivity. Your dentist will recommend a fluoride varnish for your teeth. And that is the reason why, because fluoride has what we call a topical action. Now, what Elvis is alluding to is ingested fluoride, because there is a very clear difference between ingested fluoride and topical fluoride. When you use your toothpaste, you are applying it topically, and by topically I mean on the surface. But there is also another way that fluoride gets into the body, and that way it has to be ingested. And one of the biggest ways that fluoride is ingested into the body is through drinking water. In our setup here, in Nairobi, in Kenya, in Africa generally, many of us use water that is sourced from groundwater sources, boreholes, wells, and what have you. And what has been noted through research and through observation is that most of the groundwaters that we ingest in our domestic use, in our kitchens, and for drinking, for cooking, tends to have very high levels of fluoride. I started by saying that fluoride in the correct amount is very beneficial to the development of the hard tissues. And there are levels that have been given to us by the WHO that when we ingest fluoride at a concentration of 0.7 milligrams per liter to 1.2 milligrams per liter, that is when the beneficial effect of fluoride is seen in the body. Beyond that, then we start having what we see as dental fluorosis.
Yeah, Doc, I think I'll just add on to your point. So from a Davis and Shirtliff perspective, of course, we're a water and energy company and we offer solutions to people in that space, water and energy. And one of the things that is very clear in most of the urban areas, whether it's Nairobi or the cities, Eldoret, Kisumu, most of the urban areas and even some of the rural areas, the main source of water is increasingly becoming groundwater.
Yes.
And because of that, one of the trends we've noticed, we do have a lab at Davis and Shirtliff, so we actually conduct tests in the water. And one of the things we've noticed over time, in a period of about 10 years, the fluoride levels in the groundwater has been increasing. I'll give you an example. About 10 years ago, most of the places in Nairobi, groundwater would have fluorides of about 3 milligrams per liter, 4 milligrams per liter, and we offer solutions for that. But right now, data shows from our lab, we have data showing that getting 15, 20, upwards of 25 milligrams per liter is not strange. So as you rightly put it, from us we're seeing it from the tests, and I think from you as a dentist you're actually seeing it. You're seeing the effects.
You're seeing the clinical effects of
exactly
increased fluoride ingestion. Because what happens with children, there is a critical period during which the ingestion of fluoride will affect them adversely. From the time a child is developing in the womb, a fetus is developing in the womb, to the time a child is around age 8 to 9 years, that's a very critical period of tooth development. So between those 2 points in time, that is when the child's tissues are developing all the teeth that individual will ever need for life. The primary teeth, what we call the milk teeth, and the secondary dentition, what we call the permanent teeth, although that can be taken with a pinch of salt because teeth fall out, teeth are knocked
Yes.
out. But like we said, there's a very critical period of tooth development that when the fluoride is ingested, it finds its way to the bloodstream. Once it finds its way to the bloodstream, it will find its way to the jaws where the teeth are developing and be incorporated into the apatite crystals. Now, teeth are made up of what we call calcium hydroxyapatite crystals. And when fluoride is in a safe concentration, the hydroxy part of the hydroxyapatite crystal is switched out with the fluoride ion so that it becomes calcium fluoroapatite. So when that crystal is developing in the body within what we talked about, the recommended levels, that tooth structure is very hard and very resistant to decay. But beyond that level, then you have the tooth not mineralizing as it should. Rather than mineralize by incorporating the fluoride, the mineralization of that tooth is altered. And you end up with very weak teeth that are brittle and porous to varying degrees. So when the children come to the clinic, you will find that there are various degrees of fluorosis that we are talking about, because we usually start off with white spots on the teeth. So the parents who are concerned, my child's teeth look like chalk. They are as white as chalk. And then as time goes by, those white spots tend to become darker. And in even more severe cases of fluorosis, the tooth structure actually crumbles. And now the child is in a lot of pain, a lot of sensitivity, because now the structure of the tooth is not as it should be. So such a child cannot eat well, such a child does not thrive as a result. And so those are the issues that we are seeing in the dental clinic with time as people use boiled water.
Yeah, Doc, I'd just like to clarify or confirm, is this something that primarily just affects kids? At what point can you say it stops affecting a human being as they develop when they're exposed to fluoride?
Speaking as a dentist, where dental development is concerned, children, like we said, between the age of in utero, from the time they're developing in the womb, to the time a child is around age 8 to 9 years old, that is the critical period of tooth development. Beyond that, if they were to take water that is high in fluoride, it is not likely to affect their teeth by causing dental fluorosis. There might be other effects of the fluoride, but dentally we have that window period up to the time a child is around 8 to 9 years of age.
All right, thanks, Doc. And so in terms of, I'll just go back to a discussion I think we had off air regarding toothpaste and toothpaste with fluoride versus toothpaste. We're just saying, growing up, a lot of the advertisements around toothpaste used to promote toothpaste with fluoride. That's not the case anymore. You know, I'd just like you to explain the situation there regarding what we see now and back then.
Like we said earlier, fluoride has effects on two fronts.
Yeah.
When it is ingested into the body and incorporated into the hard tissues, that's ingested fluoride. And then we have topical fluoride, which is applied to the surfaces of the teeth, like when you brush your teeth with a toothpaste that contains fluoride. So many parts per million, so many parts per million. So the reason toothpaste is impregnated with fluoride is because that action of toothpaste on the surface of the tooth actually replenishes the mineral of the tooth at a surface level. Because what usually happens when you're developing a cavity is that bacterial acids cause the mineral of the tooth to dissolve. And I'm using that word lightly for the purposes of this discussion. So what fluoride does, it causes the remineralization of the tooth and therefore strengthens the tooth. So fluoride is not all bad. It just has to be used in the correct amounts and in the correct way. And it is for that same reason that we recommend that children be supervised when they're brushing their teeth. Because if they swallow the fluoride, then it's troublesome. Because the concentration of fluoride, for example, in toothpaste, pick any from the supermarket aisles. We are talking like an adult formulation usually contains about 1,000 to 1,400 parts per million of topical fluoride. That tells you it should not be ingested.
Yes.
That tells you a child should be supervised. That tells you smaller children should use much smaller amounts to brush teeth. And we usually recommend, if a child is really small, like let's say age 2, 3, thereabouts, 1.5 to 3 years old, it's just a smear of toothpaste, like the size of a grain of rice. Yeah? Don't be swayed by the marketing that says use a precise amount. A precise amount for a child is entirely too much fluoride.
Yeah.
Because they tend to swallow it. I mean, it's bubblegum flavored or what have you. So they're very likely to ingest it, and it can cause problems if it is continued.
Right. So now you have parents bringing their children to the clinic, and this is a problem you're seeing. Again, you as a dentist, what do you normally recommend them to do? Because in the context of this discussion, we're actually talking about fluoride in water. And of course, I'll come in with some of the solutions that are available in the market. But I just want to understand from a dentist perspective, when you're treating the child with this issue, what do you normally recommend the parents to do, either to as a preventive measure, while you offer the curative measures at the hospital?
From my end as a dentist, if a child comes in with dental fluorosis, what I will do is initially curative. Because by the time that child is coming to us, they are already affected by the fluorosis. And you see, fluorosis not only affects the structure of the teeth and causes cavities, etc., but there's a social aspect to it. Because a child will go to school with those brown teeth and refuse to interact with their classmates because of bullying that ensues because of the difference in appearance from their peers. So for a child who already has fluorosis, there are options to cover up the mottling, the staining, the loss of tooth structure that comes with fluorosis, depending on the severity. So for lower severities, we can bleach the teeth. As we go along, we can do veneers, whether directly placed in the clinic or those that we have to fabricate and send to the laboratory. For more severe cases where there's loss of tooth structure, we can even do crowns. But I have found myself very many times asking said parent, do you have other children at home? Are they younger? And if the answer is yes, I usually find myself recommending, please get a filter that would remove the excess fluoride from the water for the sake of the younger ones who are within that critical window period of tooth development.
Okay.
Because beyond that, all I can do is cover up.
Yeah. And I guess this is where now the solution providers like us come in.
Yes.
I'd like to take this opportunity now to just maybe talk about some of the solutions that are available in the market.
Yes.
So from our perspective, and as I mentioned before, we do have a lab, so we can actually test the water. So we take a sample, and for all this groundwater that we have from boreholes, from wells, we have a whole record of samples that we've taken and tested. And as I mentioned earlier, the numbers are going up by the day. So from our perspective, we have quite a number of solutions that we can offer from both a domestic level, a community level, a centralized treatment, decentralized treatment as we call them. But I think the most important thing to start with is, of course, what you alluded to, the standards. We are guided by standards. So there is WHO, World Health Organization drinking water standards, and as you mentioned, between 0.7 to 1.2. In Kenya, for example, KEBS, the standards are given by KEBS, and and the CAP standard is slightly higher than the WHO standard. It's at 1.5 milligrams per liter.
On the higher limit.
Yes, on the higher limit. So that's really, and when we're talking about prevalence of fluoride, we're talking about 20 parts per million. Then we're looking at 15 times over and above what the upper limit should be. So it is a big issue, as you mentioned. Now, there are various technologies that are available to remove fluoride from water. One of the most prevalent or common solutions is actually what we call reverse osmosis. You may have heard of this, and we have this in both domestic and commercial stroke community setup. Now, just an overview of the technology. So reverse osmosis basically is a technology that is used to remove salts from water. So it not only removes fluoride, but it will also remove other salts from water, which is what is also called desalination. When you take seawater, take it through a reverse osmosis, and you get fresh water. And traditionally, the technology was not very common because one of the main limitations was energy consumption. So it's a very energy-intensive process. But over the years, the manufacturers have managed to develop miniature systems that can be installed in the house with a very small pump that you barely feel the electricity bill. So that is a solution that is actually very available. As Davis and Shirtliff, we have it. In fact, we sell a lot of these domestic units. And I think one of the questions that always comes up is when you install these units, say you're living in a rental house, and you install it in your kitchen. There are some that are kitchen, you install it under the sink. We actually call them under sink units. And there are some that look like dispensers. There are some that are tabletop. So we have a variety of these units. But one of the main things is the unit is portable. It's actually something you can install in your house.
Exactly. To your other rental house, or to the house you've built in Kabul.
Exactly. Exactly. So you're living in a rental house, you're moving to another rental house or a house now you've constructed. This is something you can actually uninstall and go and install it. And then the systems have also been made very simple in such a way that once you learn how to service it, you can actually do it by yourself. You know, it has a system of sort of cartridge filters that you can learn to actually change them by yourself. So it's nothing complicated. We have all those units here. On average, the system would set you back about 25 to 30,000 depending on the setup that you need to install in your kitchen. But I'm just reflecting on the process you've talked about when now the child comes in and they already have a problem. And I'm sure if we were to look at average cost of all that treatment that you're talking about, this seems like
incomparable.
Absolutely.
It is incomparable. And you're talking about all the teeth that show up when you smile. So about 8 teeth up and 6 teeth down. So if you compare that to just installing a system under the sink, I think you can see what makes more sense.
Quick math from what you're saying, 8 plus 6, that's about 14. And we look at 7,000-8,000, we're already close to about 90, 100,000, you know. If I look at the cost of installation, plus even maintaining, you know, changing the cartridges, which would cost you about 3,000 every 4-6 months, as you say, it is nothing. And this, you're talking about one child, so for someone who has even said that cost really just grows exponentially.
Completely. One other thing I want to mention with water filters. You mentioned that you have the under sink filter and you have the dispenser type of the bottle. So what I've found, parents asking, but I've been buying water, so why does my child have fluorosis? So I've always had to find myself explaining to them that all water that is ingested by a child, either through plain drinking water, milk formula, or even the food we cook with said water. So installing such a system does not mean you only put it in the dispenser. You won't only put that water in the dispenser. That water should also be used for cooking the food that those children in that window period that they'll be eating. Mixing formula, washing fruits, washing food, washing cereals, boiling cereals, because many of us boil cereals and then keep them in the freezer to cook at a later date. Even things like that require that we use water that has already been filtered to remove the excess fluoride. Yeah, just to ensure that we are protecting ourselves not only from dental fluorosis, because that's the one that is most visible, but even skeletal fluorosis, because what we need to protect our children, not only from what we can see, but from what we can't see.
And I think just to piggyback on your point regarding the misconceptions, like as you say, someone says they buy water, they drink dispenser water. I think the other misconception that we find is someone might say, I boil water.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, tell me about your experience with that.
I always find it funny that when parents tell me I boil water, why do my children suffer from fluorosis? And they take them back to chemistry lessons. If you boil salty water, you will end up with salt at the bottom of the pan. So the same concept applies to water that is rich in fluoride. If you boil water that is rich in fluoride, that fluoride will be more concentrated in that sample of water at the end of the boiling. And that's what happens when we cook food. Yeah, the fluoride concentrates even more. So we can't escape this thing, but we can manage ourselves around it. Yeah, to ensure food.
Yeah, just as a clarification, boiling water is primarily for disinfection. So it
bacterial.
Only, yes,
yeah,
it
killing
will only
bugs.
take care of bacteria
Yes.
and nothing else.
Yeah.
So any salts that are in the water, as you say, they'll remain there, they'll even concentrate.
Yes.
When you're talking about even tea, this is from now the agriculture perspective. You're planting your tea or any other crops that you plant, you're doing agriculture with water with fluoride, they still find their way into our bodies when we consume this food. So I think that's a very important clarification that as much as we're focusing on the drinking water, the cooking water, there's still all these other ways that fluoride can find itself in our bodies. Right, so just getting back to the treatment methods, as we said, so boiling is not a method of removing fluoride. You actually need a filter or a purifier, as we call them. So that's the word we use because filter is a bit very basic. So we call them purifiers. So as I mentioned, one of the most prevalent technologies or common technologies is the under-sink units or the reverse osmosis units in various forms. Under-sink, tabletop, dispenser, and all that. Now, that's not the only solution that is out there. There is filter cartridges or filter resins or filter media, whichever name you want to use, that we call fluoride removal resins. So what happens is the chemistry is in such a way that the same way there is exchange of fluoride for something in our bodies, you have a resin that has a high affinity for fluoride. So when you pass water through this, and it will be sort of like in a container or a cartridge, and then it's able to absorb the fluoride from the water. It's a bit more complex in the sense that you have to know when the resin gets exhausted and when to change it. So as much as it's a solution that is available, we prefer to use that not in the domestic setup, but rather in setups where we are doing larger systems.
Like for estates?
Exactly. So like for an estate, for example, we actually go for a fluoride removal system that has a big container and you have this resin inside and water goes through. And after a while, you need to do a process called regeneration, which basically now purges the fluoride that has been absorbed into the drain, and then now the resin is able to absorb more fluoride. So it's a bit more complex than just having the domestic unit. So for people who, and again, from our experience, when you're talking to a whole estate, sometimes it's very difficult to get consensus in the estate. They're talking about service charge, who installs, who operates. So again, we always go back to, at an individual level, what can you do? And we found that as an easier solution to encourage, rather than saying you have to wait for the estate management to approve a project and all that. At a community level as well, same solution. Some people might recall the Nakuru defluoridation company. So for them, they were using Boncha, which is basically one of the oldest technologies for
I remember Boncha because of the, what is it called? The social acceptability or the social inacceptability of Boncha. Because, for example, if you use bones from a pig in a Muslim or Jewish community, that's already haram, so you can't use and other such.
Exactly. So this is why technologies like reverse osmosis have really come on board and they've become very common in terms of the solution. And when we talk about reverse osmosis, as much as we focused on the domestic units, we can actually scale this up as well for estates. And some estates in Nairobi, to be fair, have actually installed reverse osmosis systems. So it's a centralized treatment system. Water comes from the borehole, goes into their main tank, and then it's treated. So the beauty of that is you're getting water from your tap, your shower, and everything that is, I would say, bottled water standard. You know what you buy from the shops as water you put in your dispenser. It's basically the same quality which you're using all over your house. So there are estates that have actually implemented that in Nairobi. Institutions as well. We have a number of institutions that have done that. Schools, hospitals. So we've had these systems installed in different different setups. But at the end of the day, as I say, the complication with say estates is just the whole thing around how do you
who will
pay for it, who will maintain it, and all that. And that's why most people will almost always resort to the individual solution, which is that domestic setup or domestic sort of installation. And the one that we said is very portable. You can move with it from house to house, just uninstall it and then install it, and then you can also service it yourself. We have all the parts here for servicing. The kit would cost you about 3,000 to 5,000 every 4 to 6 months, depending on, of course, how you consume the water. But I think the most critical thing, even when you're doing the maths, beyond the calculations around going to the cost of hospital, because some of these things I don't know, maybe they're covered by insurance. When we look at the maths, the household calculations from just the water you buy, and then we incorporate the volume that you use to cook. If you're to buy water to cook, this unit will pay you back in less than a year. Those are calculations we've done, and literally it will pay you back in less than a year. So from every level, it makes a lot of sense to look at a fluoride removal solution at the domestic level. Yes.
And just to reiterate on what you've said, nowadays we have, when you're preparing for the birth of a child, you go to the hospital, you want to find out which ward, how their wards look like, you go shopping for the baby, etc., etc. Development. Already, when a mother becomes pregnant, it means that the child, the fetus, is already ingesting fluoride. That's crossing over through the placenta. So just to protect the child from as early as possible. And in addition to that, when children start going to school, you're not sure about the water they're drinking in school. So you'd rather they carry water to school that you're sure has been filtered from home.
Right. Right, thanks Doc, very interesting discussion, and I think we've covered a lot of the issues we wanted to cover. I don't know whether you have any final remarks that you'd like to just talk about as we conclude.
In conclusion, I know we are focusing quite a bit on the preventative part of dental fluorosis, especially as concerns filtration systems, domestic water, and what have you. But what I would want to encourage families is that there are options to help people who have suffered from dental fluorosis. It is not a lost cause. You can come to your dental clinic and we are here to help you. There are options to cover up the mottling, there are options to cover up, to fill the teeth, and to ensure that that individual is not suffering, and yet there are options to help them. In addition, of course, to preventative care.
Thank you very much, Doc. So from our side, as Davis and Shirtliff, as I mentioned, and just to summarize what we talked about, fluoride is a very critical issue in the country. I mean, we're looking at the cost of treatment, the aesthetic value, basically the psychological issues that you talked about, and especially children at that age. So what we're saying is, number one, let people be aware of the issue. Let people be aware that the water they are consuming has fluoride in it, and tests are available. In fact, at Davis and Shirtliff in our lab, we can do a fluoride test for as low as just 1,000 shillings. You know, bring a sample of half a liter of water, and you can quickly test the water for you. And then once the test is done, and most likely, if you, especially in the regions we've spoken about, most likely it will come back positive with the levels above the recommended KEBS and WHO standards. So once that is the case, then of course we have solutions around treating the water as we have discussed. So let people know that this is a problem, but there are solutions. Yeah, and just in conclusion, so this is the first Davis and Shirtliff podcast, and I think it's been a very interesting discussion. We intend to do more of this, and I think watch out for our next podcast. We will be talking about disinfection in water, as we mentioned. So boiling is one of the methods, but there is a myriad other methods of disinfecting water. There's been cholera outbreaks all over the country. I know it's been in the news, and we'll be talking about solutions around disinfecting water so that we can prevent some of these waterborne diseases. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to having more conversations around water, dental health, among other topics. And as I said, the next discussion will be around disinfection of water. Thank you very much and goodbye.